Brilliant, Dylan. Super interesting to hear all your different points and um, yeah, your talk. So building a business, going from a side hustle to full-time Squarespace expert, what does that look like? So here's a little story of how yeah, that happened. Next slide, please. So back in 2014, Made by Dave came about. It To give you some context, this was Squarespace 6 was out. Mostly, you had a visually pleasing portfolio to choose from, and otherwise, blogs was the key part of the audience. What drew me to using Squarespace was that the design was the primary driving factor for building it and user experience. And then that it was just simple and intuitive to go and use. Back then, Canva had only been out for about a year and was hardly known. Design tools such as Adobe XD and Figma didn't exist. And so then I built the first 8 sites completely for free. Now you might think, why on earth would you build sites completely for free? That sounds absolutely bonkers. So at the time, I did have a full-time job. And so in that sense, financially, it didn't make a difference. And it was just more of my time as putting into it. But what it did do is it helped build a portfolio, and it then gave the opportunity to showcase work that I could do. It was mostly for people within my network that I just wanted to help out. They were people that they couldn't afford a web designer, and others that had like a brilliant skill, a brilliant idea, but no skill. And finally, there was one client that they had like paid over the odds for a site that, when I looked at it, just looked old and dated and needed a freshen up. But with those 8 sites and others going forwards, I've definitely made some big mistakes on those things, like not even charging. So when I first started to charge people, I didn't take a deposit at all. I just got started building the site and thought, oh, I'll have something to show you and I can prove like what I've gone and done. And then there was one client that said, actually, don't like it at all, and just walked away. And I was left feeling like, oh man, I've spent like far too many hours putting into this site and it's just totally gone. So now 50% deposit is asked for upfront before we even start and touch a project. And that guarantees that in that sense, yeah, we're only going to do the project with that. So then came building a team. So there was basically enough sites that I couldn't do it all by myself. And so then bringing in freelancers. So from 2016, just bringing in freelancers to work on sites, just ad hoc. There might be one site that I didn't have the capacity for, so I passed it to someone else. They would go and do the design. I would sign off and check it, and then off we go. Then at the beginning of 2021, I then received an invitation to join Marketplace, which then grants you quite a scary badge, which is a Squarespace Expert. And for that was a complete game changer, but I'll come on to that in a bit. So since then, things have only accelerated, and we've added our 8th team member this year. Next slide, please. So the start, there was a need. Next, please. There was a need for just having the site itself. Do 2 extra clicks, Tasha. So there was a need for it. Basically, I had this creative outlet that I needed to do something with. I was working in a job for an international not-for-profit. I was running the digital side of their organization. And as a global business, they had 60 offices worldwide, but their websites were built on a variety of different platforms and all looked completely different. So Squarespace basically was my introduction via that. And what we did is then set up custom built sites for all of these offices, and they were translated into their own different languages. They were fully customized beyond a typical Squarespace site. And I then thought, hang about, this seems simple enough. I can probably do this myself. So the platform itself, Squarespace, from what I was seeing back then and still remains today, just super clean, clear, straightforward, easy to use, and I haven't looked back. People have approached us to say, can you do other types of sites, WordPress or Shopify or other things like that? And it's basically been a flat no, because for us, we want to pass the sites off to the client, hand it back over to them. And I don't want to pass something that we are then going to be needing to do lots and lots of follow-up with. And so Squarespace has remained number one, front and center. And it just stood back then, and it even remains today, head and shoulders above the competition, primarily for the fact that you're building design-rich sites. So where did the name come from? Why Made by Dave? Typically, web designers would put their name in the footer, and so it was basically a playful take on that, and it just naturally came about. It's professional and informative, and basically does what it says on the tin. Next slide, please. So the side hustle, 3 clicks. So what I created is almost something totally accidental that kind of happened to work. So what happened is I basically had too much work that I ended up turning off the opportunities or services that came through. And it meant that I was basically booking myself up far too many weeks in advance, and that I was using all of my spare time, my evenings, weekends, taking calls, and essentially just doing far too much. Then my wife and I were expecting our second child, and I needed to keep this beast running. And this is where one of our team members, Ian, came along, and essentially he took the projects and proved that we didn't need to turn off the leads, and then we could build way more sites than I actually thought might have been possible. So it grew organically beyond the people that were in my initial network, the friends, family, friends of friends. People just say, oh, I know such and such, you need to talk to them. And we met international clients. And so therefore the art of juggling time zones definitely was taken into consideration. And with all of that was the invitation from Squarespace to join Marketplace. And it meant that there was lots of work, lots of leads that were coming in for us to go and do. But next slide, please. The journey itself definitely was like a bit of a challenging one. So it had meant lunch breaks, evenings, weekends were totally committed to the side hustle. And it meant that it was just using up loads of my free time. Then I'd stumbled across Ghost plugins. And if you're not familiar with what Ghost offer, it's essentially a lot of primarily free plugins that you can add on to your site and be able to just make them enhance and look so much better than the original stuff that you get out of the box, although that is what clients were asking for. And as a primarily designer, it meant it was like, oh, actually, I can go and do this, and I can go and create all these different things that people were going and asking for. Then I came across just the community within Facebook groups, within LinkedIn, and there was just a real buzz and vibe that was taking place, and lots of ability to connect with people and find out where they were going, what their challenges were, what their questions were. And it always seems, even to date, that when trying to answer different people's questions, having learned along the way that people will come from all different perspectives, and it's super interesting to see their take on things. The next part of the journey is essentially that, yeah, there was way too much work, which is a real nice to have, but I needed help from others. And so therefore building a team and getting into it, and just passing other people projects to go and freelance was definitely the just a real interesting one. I never saw when I set out that I was going to build a team, but as I look back, it's absolutely the best thing that's ever happened, because you can bounce ideas off other people, and you can take their design style as well, so that you're not always churning out things that either look very samey, or you can just make a difference to what people are doing. And it then gave the opportunity to basically quit full-time day job and fly completely solo. And yeah, haven't looked back since, and it's absolutely brilliant. But it came at the cost of trying to do way too much, essentially having two full-time jobs, which was never going to be was never actually going to be possible. And yeah, the rest is history. So next slide, please. So lessons in terms of what have I learned, and how could, if you're thinking of going full-time in this, and it currently is a side hustle, and yeah, what could you do to take those next steps in going completely freelance? So the first was to help others. As I said at the beginning, I did the work for 8 clients completely pro bono. Why? To get a portfolio that truly demonstrated what I could do, but it sought out to offer services that for people that that were never able to afford to pay for a site, those that were not for profits. One in particular was an author that was looking to exhibit their work, and in return was able to create a portfolio of work that showcased design, technical ability, and then ended up leading to first paying client. Seeking help. When I didn't have the bandwidth to deliver client projects solo, asking others to design and work and assist me was the best thing that I've ever done. It showed what was possible. A collaborative process is always super insightful. You pick up tips, tricks, and gain from others new perspectives and approaches to how you'd go about what somebody is actually after. Plus, it's always fun. Prioritizing time. However busy or pressured work gets, for me, family must come first, and that you can definitely learn the hard way with trying to put all your energy into running a business. And it's almost flipping it on its head in terms of saying, okay, what is your priorities? It does take a lot of hard graft and setting up a business, so it can be so tempting to keep driving and forego other commitments. Having fun along the way. Don't take things seriously. When you're having fun, it brings freedom. It allows the creative juices to flow, which essentially turns into opportunities to go and create sites. And yeah, I think we've worked on in excess of 350 sites, which is absolutely wild. But it means that you can just have fun with building it, learn from what you've gone and done, and learn those lessons. But people think that working like a 50+ hour week will bring them happiness, like financially, etc. It won't. I'll just be frank with you. Like, it will just end up leading to burnout. Being part of that supposed like 5 a.m. club honestly isn't cracked up to what it's meant to be in terms of just spending way too many hours. You would end up, if you totted up the number of hours that you might spend times the supposed hourly rate you were like charging yourself out at, you'd probably find that you're not actually making that amount of money on what you're up to. Then dreaming big. So I'd say go for it in terms of like, you never know what's around the corner. Honestly, I didn't think the day would come where Squarespace would approach me and say, hey, we'd like you to become an expert on their marketplace. But it did. And I couldn't believe little old me gets to play on the international stage. So anyway, those are a few thoughts in terms of how the side hustle ended up turning into a full-time job. Tasha,